Alright, so we're going to start today's video off a little bit different. Normally I do product videos and everything, but I figured I'd take the opportunity today to try and teach you guys something. This is my 1999 Pontiac Firebird. It was a base model. I added a TA hatch to it. I've gone through and added the M90 off of the front wheel drive cars. I chopped up and put it on there. And then I also have gone through and manual swapped it because it wasn't automatic. I had an issue with the clutch kit I got. The slave cylinder I don't think was of very good quality, and it went out and it's causing me some issues now. When I go to take off, anytime I'm in first, the clutch chatters really bad, enough that you can visibly see the car shake. And then shifting 1 to 2, it's also really bad, but at 3 to 4 it kind of mitigates itself down a little bit because the car isn't moving. It's just a little bit easier for the vibration to be, I guess, hidden as you go. But I'm going to be going through today. We're going to do a new flywheel, new clutch, and a new slave cylinder. And I figured I might as well take you guys along for the adventure so you can kind of see what it's like and get a rough estimate of what kind of work you're going to be involved with getting under here and pulling out a T5 and just getting it out the car, going through doing a new clutch and everything, get a rough time frame for how long it'll take. We are going to be starting here soon. It is currently 9:19 on Friday the 14th. I'm hoping to be done probably by about 3 p.m. this afternoon. We're talking clutch bled, car drivable, good to go is what I'm aiming for. I've pulled the trans myself personally more times than I could count. I did the manual swap originally, had to pull it out again shortly after to swap to the billet shift keys for 3/4 because the stamped steel ones that these have from factory can have issues. It's even something that I've seen happen in the T56. They like to upgrade to the billet shift keys for 1/2 and then the 3/4. So I went through and I did those. After I locked it up into third, I added a short throw when I did that, and then I had to pull it again recently when I did the M90 swap just because it was easier. I went through, I added brass shift pads, and I put a bearing retainer plate in from 5speeds.com. The guy's been working with the T5 for as long as I've been alive. He does a lot of the road racing stuff with Jaguars in them, and I went through and I ordered that from him because he says that when you add that to the car, you're looking at making about 400 pound-feet of torque reliably because it supports the offset shaft and the transmission and keeps it from ovaling out the bearing race location, which then is what he claims causes the transmission to fail, is that it ovals out and then your offset shaft pushes away from the main shaft, and that's when you get gears that chew each other up and then it will break the transmission. So we went through, we added that, and in theory the trans should be good for about 400 pound-feet of torque. When I did the original manual swap, I rebuilt it with carbon synchros and did new bearings and everything in it to help it kind of handle higher RPM shifting and a little bit more abuse than the stock brass ones. And yeah, I'll pick the camera up again once we get it up in the air and we get going with it. Quick pointer for anybody who's new to these cars. You'll see a lot of times they have a gap right here by the door. I've fixed mine, it's not as bad, but this fender will poke out even farther and you can almost fit your finger in there a lot of times. And you can see here it gets a little worse. The issue is this tab here, people will put a jack here to lift up the car. Don't do it. Your jack goes somewhere on the frame rail to lift up the car. If you jack from here, it'll bend this tab and it pushes your fender out and it looks really bad. To fix this, don't do it when it's cold, wait till it's warmer. You can try getting this warm with a heat gun and bending it back slowly. Don't go fast, you can break the plastic and then this fender just needs replaced. If you do it nice and slow, you can just get it warm. It'll help soften up the plastic and then the metal behind it, and you can just slowly bend it back and work it, and it'll pull it a little bit closer to the door as time goes on. I got a little bit more to do with mine, but I've also got the W68 ground effect kit. Over there you can see it in the corner. I've got it all painted up. I'm going to repaint it to match the body color here soon, but it helps kind of hide a lot of this here where it sticks out. So, we're back under the car. We've got it up off the ground. I have disconnected this line. This is a little plastic piece I'm talking about. It only goes so far down, but usually they're set about here. You got to just push it down in there because there's these little spline teeth in here. And when you push this down, it pushes them off and then you can pull it out. We're at the point where we got the drive shaft out. I undid the top bolt, spun the U-joint cap around, undid the top bolt, spun around, did push the drive shaft into the trans, and then you can pull it backwards and it'll come out. That's what this fluid dripping is that's where the drive shaft belongs. Drive shaft is over here to my right. Make sure when you take it out, you don't lose these caps or drop them. They're full of needle bearings. If you lose them, you got a mess. You either got to find them or replace them. And that's just a mess. So our next step is going to be undoing the torque arm, which is right here at the top. There's a bolt that you can just fit just like that with a 3/8 ratchet. And you'll undo it. And then this plate, you can slide it towards the front of the car and then tilt it towards the front of the car and slide it up and out. And it lets you just slide the torque arm straight up against the top of the trans tunnel. It gets it off the trans, makes it a little easier to drop. I leave the bushing on mine installed because it's a poly bushing and it's a 1-piece. Factory is a 2-piece, I do believe, and it's rubber. So you can just open this and then the torque arm will pretty much just pop right out. And then the next step will be undoing the bolt here and the trans cross member. But I am going to save the trans cross member. I'm going to undo all the bell housing bolts first, and then I will undo the trans cross member as I'm ready to actually drop it fully out of the car. So I undid the bolt at the top. We're going to reach up in here. You can tilt it away. Like I said, you just bring it towards the front of the car. You can see me pushing here. Then you can tilt it up, wiggle it out, and just like that, it's free. You can take that and push it and just slide it up. Alright, so trans cross member time. We've undone the bell housing bolts. Extensions are going to be your friend, especially the one at the top. On the right, you can kind of see it probably up through there. I'll try and put an arrow in on it. But just get like 3 feet of extensions, like this, and go from over the cross member up to that one. Make your life a lot easier. And then we're going to undo, I do one on each side, and then I start getting these ones loose, and then I support the trans with a jack that I use to lift the car right here. And then I get this out of the way, at which point you got to get yourself underneath the car. It's best to have a friend help you with this. You can just undo this and let it sag and then wrestle with it, but it's just easier to have a friend because you can have the jack support it while you get ready in position, then remove the jack's weight, like helping to keep it up, and start to work the trans and try and get it out and back. I'm going to try and see if I can do this with a shifter on, simply because I don't want to rip all my interior apart. You can see that it's kind of a mess with how I cut it, and getting this boot in's a total pain. So I'm hopefully going to be able to get it out without removing the shifter. I'm going to stick it in third real fast, and then we're going to see if we can just work it back and drop it out. We've got the cross member out, everything's unbolted. The shifter's still in the car. I don't know how well it's going to cooperate with us because it looks like it's kind of caught on the boot. We're going to push up around it a little bit. There we go, it's past the set screw, so that should be good now. This transmission, the T5 World Class, only weighs, I think it's like 95, 96 pounds is the dry weight. I've got a shifter on there, which will be a couple pounds. So I'm around and call it like 100 pounds after fluid, this, and everything else. I'm going to guess that it's about 100 pounds. I am comfortable bench pressing this out. I've done it before, and I figured I'm going to show you guys how I do it solo. You can use a trans jack. I just don't have one here, and I figured I can show you guys how I do this solo, just so you get an idea. I lightly support the back end with a jack until I can wiggle it, and it pops free. We've already wiggled it, so it's free of the dowels. And at this point, we'll just give it a couple more wiggles. I don't know if it's going to want to cooperate with that shifter up in there. It doesn't look like it because I need about another ½ inch or so. There goes more weight. And just like that, it's free. Now, obviously you don't want to end up wearing shifter trans fluid. It's not ideal. You just lower that end down. Support this end. And slowly, but surely, wiggle your way free. And you're out of underneath of it. It's out of the car. Most people are going to take the shifter off inside the car, but as you can see in my trans tunnel, it's a little mangled, makes it a little bit more difficult. So I elected to do it this way. Probably not the best decision, but that really wasn't too bad, I don't think. Sure, it could have gone better, but total, it probably took me 3 minutes between wiggling it, having a friend assist with the jack, and getting it lowered just a bit so it was there to catch it, but not really supporting it.
Give it an up and down wiggle as you pull backwards. It'll come off your dowels up here, and then you just drop it out. You can click the button on the top.
So Trend is out. It's currently 10:55, as you can see. We didn't really get started till probably 20 minutes or so after the first clip that I took talking about what we were going to be doing today. I can't remember what time that was. I think it was like 9:30 or so, but we probably started a little bit closer to 10. So we're going to remove the slave at this point. We undid the bolts for it. There's 2 bolts. And then you have to take the bell housing off with the T5, which is so much fun, to replace the slave. I'm probably going to take it out and brake clean it because it's dirty. But the 4 bolts, where'd one go? Here they are. They're 18 mil on the heads. I had to get a replacement. It's an M12 by 175 is the bolt type. You can see it there. I got a 40 mil one. It's long enough. It works. And then I'm just gonna make sure I Loctite these because they're gonna need it, especially considering I had one of them back out already. It's a good call. So I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna brake clean this out really well, try and get it cleaned up a bit, and then I will be back in here to put all this together. So while my friend is out there cleaning off the bell housing, I'm going to get under here and I'm going to remove the pressure plate, the clutch, and the flywheel because I have a replacement for all of them. That doesn't feel like it's the right size. So I'm going to get started at that while he's out there. These are probably a 13, but if you give me just a moment, I'll be right back. I'll be able to tell you for sure. Oh, the flywheel bolts on this are in fact a 14 mil. I've got it right here. There's 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And again, I had to replace one with Harbor from Lowe's. I've been running like this for, I couldn't even tell you how long, and I've not had any issues so far. But I'm gonna go ahead and get these taken out and then get the flywheel off. Clutch is out. Flywheel bolt, or flex plate bolts. It's not in great shape, as you can tell. There's a lot of little hot spots and everything all on this. So we're just gonna go ahead and replace it because I got a new one off Rock Auto. That's where I like to get a lot of my parts for this. The impact clutch, I got the last one that they had. I don't know if they're getting more or what the story on that is, but I got the last one. So we're gonna go ahead and we'll get this broke loose. Get the new one tossed up here. When the clutch came off, the throwout bearing was actually loose, which is a little bit unusual because these are relatively press fit into the crankshaft. So I'll have to grab the new one and make sure I put it in there and get it as it's supposed to be. But once that'll be after I get the new flywheel on or ready to go on, because it'll be easier to hammer it in without all of this in the way. So I'll check back when I get this one off. It's just going to be a matter of zipping these 8 bolts out and then carefully lowering this because they're not very light. They got a decent bit of weight to them. Clutch out. This chunk here is actually because this fell when I undid the last bolt. This is the the pilot bearing that came with a new clutch. As you can see, it's a needle bearing inside compared to this one was just a solid bushing. So this one is going to be in my opinion, it would be better quality. I have yet to find out because I haven't ran it. But one thing you always want to do whenever you're going and like putting a new clutch on and everything is make sure like at least your pilot bearing fits, and then it would be best to take the clutch and slide it on there too. My hands are super dirty, so I'm a bit wary. You can go through and you can just grab it and really gently try and make sure you don't touch any of the actual clutch material with your hands. I'm specifically reaching over it and grabbing in here. But I'm going to just take it and make sure it slides on like that, and we're good to go. And this one is an impact. It's supposed to be a stage 2, but it looks like the back of it is pucked. And then the front's traditional. So I'm really curious how this is going to drive. Because I know that pucked clutches get a decent bit of chatter when you go to take off with them. And I didn't realize this one was pucked on the back. I thought it was similar to the old one I had where it would be just standardized clutch material. But I'm gonna go through, repackage, well, slide the plastic back over this, get the new flywheel in there, get that new bushing installed, and we'll see how she does. Flywheel going in. On these cars, they're only really supposed to go one way. So you can see like the holes for the threads aren't quite centered, but I went ahead and I bolted it down just so you guys can see that they do set off. So I got to take this off and just, you got to keep spinning the flywheel around on the crank until it lines up right. Or you just pay attention to how the old one came off, and then you can just put it back on the same way. On, got it tight, and we're gonna move out to the trans. We're gonna put the slave and the bell housing back on it, and then we'll scoot back under here. We'll wipe this down with some brake clean, because when these ship from factory, they have an oil coating on them to keep them from rusting, and then you're gonna touch it with your hands and get it oily. So you need to make sure you get this clean as you can. And the best way to do that is to use some paper towel and some brake clean, spray it, wipe it down, don't touch it again with your hands as best you can, and then you're going to put the clutch on with the clutch alignment tool in the pilot bearing, and then you'll put the pressure plate on and slowly start to work your way around and tighten it down, and try and keep your, like, whenever I go to snug it down, I keep a little bit of upwards pressure, just a little bit on the the clutch alignment tool, and it will help keep you from having to loosen and redo it, because it'll tighten it down, and then as long as you can slide that alignment tool in and out super easy into the pilot bushing, like all the way in, all the way out with like very little resistance is what you want. When you go to stab the trans in, you're not trying to fight things being misaligned between the pilot bearing and the clutch. The other thing is, I'll show you here in a minute, I like to line up one of my spline teeth on the clutch alignment tool to point exactly straight up, and then what I do is I'll spin the input shaft so one of them points exactly straight up, so I don't have to sit and wiggle it and twist it, and it makes it a little bit easier to just stab the trans straight into the car. We got the bell housing back on. I got to bolt it down still, but on the T5s with the internal slave, you have to take the bell housing off with the slave cylinder because it pokes through the side of the bell housing, which is so wonderful. But you have to take it off with it, and then you just want to make sure. I also Loctite these bolts. Pretty much all of this I Loctite, just because you don't want it backing out. And I already had one of those bell housing to transmission bolts back out and cause me issues. So I'm going to go ahead, I'll put these in, I'll get them Loctited, snug down, do the same with the 4 bell housing bolts, and then we'll put the pressure plate, the clutch on, and we should be able to stab this back in. I went ahead and I got the bell housing put back on the car. Everything tightened down. I got lock washers and Loctite on it. And then I had my friend come in here to take out the center console just so we don't have to fight the shifter. We can throw it up in here and then fill it with fluid from inside the car. When you go to take your center console out, there's going to be one screw here. There'll be another one on the mirroring side. And then there will be 2 screws here in the back. Those will be the 3 screws you need to remove. And then a lot of times you might have a 4th one as well, straight down through the ashtray. There'll be one down in here. And you'll just remove, well, it's 5 total because you got 2 here, the one in the ashtray, and then 2 on each side. And then on the far side here of the e-brake, there's this lever, and you can push it down so that it doesn't engage, and it will pull all the way up without tripping the teeth, and then you don't risk stretching your e-brake cable or anything. Mine's currently damaged, so it's acting all kinds of special. But yours will not be in the same manner in most cases, so you'll need to make sure you reach in here, you push and get this so that it's popped up, and you can swing this up with no resistance on the e-brake cable to stretch it, and then you'll be good to go to pick it up and slide it backwards. You will have your cigarette lighter connections that you'll have to undo, but otherwise you should just be good to pick it up, get it up over this, take it up and up and up, and then slide it backwards and over, and it'll come right out. This is our clutch alignment tool. It is what you use to insert into the bushing there and help keep your clutch up where it goes. What I like to do is, I didn't notice, but this one has this little plastic tab here at the top, and I line that up so that one of the splines on the clutch alignment tool lines up with it, and then I match the ring to it. And when I put the clutch on, I make sure that I point that pretty much perpendicular to the ground so that I know one of the splines is pointing straight up at 12 o'clock, and then I can match it on the input shaft of the trans
and it just makes it a bit easier to try and stab it in, because instead of trying to guess and figure out where it's at, you only got a little wiggle side to side and then you'll be in. Clutch on the alignment tool. Make sure you don't touch the disc with your hands. I slid the plastic bag on it down, slid the alignment tool in, and then picked it up with that. And when you got it hanging here, you'll notice I can push it up and it moves. So when you push it up, it's sitting flat against your crankshaft, and you can spin it, sure, but when it's sitting like this, your center line for the trans, instead of being flat like it should be with the engine, gets put at a bit of an angle, and it makes it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to stab your trans in. So what you want to do is when you put the pressure plate on and you start tightening it, you want to try and hold this up as best you can while you snug everything down evenly, and then go through and pull it out, in and out, in and out as you go through and snug it all down to make sure you don't get it out of center, so that when you go to put the trans in, it just slides in like butter. I got all these snug down to this point, and you can see it slides in all the way, super nice, right? No problem whatsoever. It goes right in there, right where we want it to be, and it's still pointed up, straight and down. You'll probably end up, when you're tightening these down, the engine's going to want to spin over. You'll want to set a pry bar against the floor, or use one of your dowels to keep the engine from spinning, or have a friend try and hold the crank, etc. while you torque these down. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And then if you torque it down and it ends up spun over, that's no big deal, because I can do it even one-handed. You can spin the engine over because you got leverage back here. And just try and make sure you get this lined up as dead on, straight up and down as you can, and then you'll match it on your input shaft for the trans, and then you can just slide it straight up and in. Mine's always been a little difficult trying to get it on these dowels. The dowels don't always want to slide straight in, so I've had to kind of fight with it, but I'll try and catch it on video here in a little bit when I go to bench press it up in there. You guys are going to see me drop it, and I've already seen me drop it on my own, and what I'm going to go for is I'll try and get under it, support it, get it up in, try and rock it, and just get it to stab in all on its own. And I'll have my friend hold the camera just so you guys can get a pretty good view of what I'm doing with it. But I'm just trying to show you guys you can do almost all of this on your own. Having a friend around is just an excellent set of extra hands to give you some help, because holding up the trans with two people is a lot easier than just one. I am underneath the car now, as all of you can see. I'm lining up my input shaft so that one of the splines points straight up towards the top of the trans up here. And it's honestly not as easy as it is outside the car, but we're about there. So what I'm going to do now is I have to get my way under the trans. I'm going to lift up the bell housing first, set it on my chest, lift it up more and scoot under it, so that I can then push it up and get it into the car. And I'll get one of the bolts threaded in to try and start holding it towards the engine, and then after that I can thread in another one, at which point we can try and support the rear end with the floor jack, or with my arm as just a brace until we get the floor jack under here. This is where it's nice to have a friend with you, or somebody who can help. They can just wheel it under, you don't have to leave the car. If it's just you, you want to try and get these bolts nice and tight, at least a decent bit, so the trans will sag a little but not fall out of underneath the car. While you get the floor jack and you get a little support on it, you can go in after it's supported and really start to tighten it down. I really recommend only doing this, like if you're doing this solo with a T5, it's not a big deal, but anything like a 4L60, 4L80, a T56, anything like that, try and have a friend, because they are substantially heavier than this one here, at which point it'd be best for you to have an extra set of hands around, guaranteed to help you lift it or support you in case you drop it or anything like that, rather than trying to wrestle with it on your own. So that being said, let's try and get started with this. You make sure you got plenty of room down here on your sides. We did take the shifter off just because it's going to make it easier to wrestle back up in here, but we're just going to tilt it up, drag it towards us a bit, rinse and repeat. As of right now, the whole trans is setting on my chest, and there's more fluid in it, go figure. We're going to scoot it forward a little bit. Get it rolled properly, and then struggle and see how we're lining it up. Now, It's looking like the engine on mine has tilted its way more towards being leveled, which is something you'll have to consider and keep an eye on. The engine with the trans on it is going to sag towards the back, make it easier to pull out. Once it's off, the engine mounts will pull it to flat, and then you got to worry about trying to tilt it so you can get in there and get everything done a little easier. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get something up on the front. I'll get the front end of the transmit or the engine jacked a little bit so it angles down more, and I can actually get this inserted. So I just got done wrestling with it. We put just a little bit of pressure on the front of the engine. When my car was NA still, I put a little bit of pressure just on the bottom of the intake manifold, like right where the throttle body and everything met. I would put a 2x4 there and just put just a little pressure. It's not a lot. The engine's going to only move like half an inch up or down, but that's all you really need. And then when I was down here wrestling with it, I felt it start to go, and I spun myself, so I had to hold the back end, and I spun and put my foot up here. Some of you older gentlemen, this is going to be really hard because we're not as flexible as we get older, but I put my knee up against it and put some upward pressure and just kind of rocked the back, and it slid right in. And right now we are made it up almost flush to the block. We got about an 1/8 inch between the bell housing and the block, and we just got to really get it tightened down at this point. And that's all that's about left. We'll go through, we got one bolt that goes over on the passenger side. It's a pass-through. We'll go ahead and get that started. Thread a nut onto it, because that's how it's set up. Get it finger tight. And then over on this side here, I don't know what you guys can see back there, but on the driver's side, just past the slave above the starter, there's another spot for a bolt to go. We'll go ahead and get that started just a bit. And at this point, the trans is fairly well secured. The next step will be throwing the trans cross member in so it's got something to set on, and then putting all our bell housing bolts in. I just want to have at least one in there so it can't slide and fall out. It's not perfectly square at this point, but it's in. And the gentleman holding the camera can even attest. He came over here, was going to give me a hand, and I threw my knee up underneath of it, and I felt it shift just the way I needed because I was able to push up on it a little more with my knee rather than my arm. And the second I did, it just slid right in. Would you agree, Joe?
Absolutely.
It just up and then slid straight in. We're seriously, basically no distance between the block and the bell housing. I can barely feel the gap between my fingertips. And at this point, we just go through and we snug it down nice and even. Make sure you Loctite these bolts too. If you're worried about them backing out, I'm going to Loctite it because I already have the ones that hold the bell housing to the trans back out. They've been Loctited. I'm just Loctiting it all at this point. Like I said, if I got to take it out again, I'm putting something else in it anyways. So we're going to get at it. I will grab the trans cross member over up to my left. We'll get that put in here. We'll start the bolts on it and get it bolted up so it's at least supporting the rear end of the trans. And then we can go through, we'll do the bell housing bolts, trans mount, drive shaft, hop inside and fill it up, and we'll be good to go. Trans is back in, as you can see. Went through, got the torque arm tightened down, cross member tightened down, trans mount tightened down, plugged in my wideband, reverse lights, speedo, all that's plugged in. Also plugged in my clutch line. And then all of the 4 bolts, we got one here, the one at the top up there, the one here, and then one at the top again. All those Loctited, tightened down real good. I used a lot of extensions for the top ones. I came from back over the cross member. Makes it a little easier to get a more straight shot, apply some leverage better, and get them torqued down. So now that those are all in, the next step is going to be bleeding the clutch, getting the drive shaft in. Well, it'll be drive shaft, onto bleeding, filling the trans, putting the shifter back in, and then we'll bleed the clutch, which everybody knows is just everyone's favorite thing on the planet to do, is bleed a clutch. I've got a friend with me again, so I'll just sit down here, crack this up, down, you know, the usual pain that goes with it, just lots of pumping the pedal, have them press it, crack it open, close it, have them let off, pump it again, press it down, open it, rinse and repeat until you got a good clutch pedal feel. Once all that's done, you should be ready to go for a test drive. One other thing is make sure you Loctite your U-joint cap bolts down there at the end. You don't want those coming loose, and you don't want to send your drive shaft into the ground or through the floor. It's not a fun time.
Cars in the air, trans is in it, drive shaft's in it, torque arm's connected. We put 4.5 quarts of Valvoline ATF in it. It's like Dex 4 or whatever. As long as it's Dex 3 or newer, it works fine. We added a little bit of brake fluid, pumped the pedal a whole bunch, and then while it was in the air, we put the clutch in, put it into gear and everything, made sure it was happy and it was working. They're not spinning the tire with it in the air. Even in gear with the clutch fully pressed, it actually didn't need a whole lot of bleeding. I believe LUK ships out their slaves with fluid in them already, because last time I put one of their LUK slaves in, I didn't have a lot of work to do with it. And then I just connected the master, and at this point we should be about good to set her down on the ground and see how she wants to party. We'll take her for a test drive around the block, make sure all is well, and so long as it is, we put the center console in and we start doing our break-in miles and then finish the tuning and see how she rips. But for now, that'll be all, and I'll update you if there's anything left to update. If not, this will be the end of the video.